Today on Locked On Phoenix Suns, Kevin Durant had a bounce-back season from a health perspective, was the best, most consistent player on the Suns all year, rewarded with the second-team All-NBA honor. But can the Suns get even more from him? Should they have to get even more from him? And how can they maximize the future Hall of Famer? Let's break it down.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we're back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 7 seasons and the host of the Just Basketball Show, wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen to kick off your Tuesday. Hopefully everybody is enjoying these last few days of not too hot weather if you're based in Phoenix. If you're not based in Phoenix, you're welcome, or congrats. You're not here. That's probably better. We're free and available everywhere, including YouTube. Guys, hit that follow or subscribe button wherever you're finding us. Get a new episode in your feed every single Monday through Friday throughout the hot days of the summer as the NBA news keeps rolling. Become an everyday or get locked onto the Phoenix Suns right here all off-season long. Joining us as he does every single Monday. Well, we're recording on a Monday. Tuesday's episode is Brendon Dueñas, writer over at Bright Side of the Sun, and we're going to talk through. It kind of just worked out this way, Brandon, that I did a Beal episode because I was kind of just thinking about Bradley Beal on Friday, and then I was thinking about Book over the weekend, and then I figured why not just do a whole little Big Three series of episodes here. So we're going to talk about all things Kevin Durant and his season, his future, everything. First, today's show brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right. I'm going to put you in a time machine, Brandon. You tell me if I were to ask October 2023 version of you, and I came back in time with all the details of what KD's season looked like, and June 2024 me told you all of that information. Would you have been pleased with what KD put together here? Played a ton of minutes, a ton of games, healthy all year, all NBA, like I said. Did he meet expectations, exceed expectations? Were you going crazy and he underperformed for you? Where are you at with this year, this age 35 season for Kevin Durant?
Yes, that's a great question. And I think, first of all, the first thing I look at is games played, because that was the biggest concern with him. He played more than Book. He played more than Beal. He was the most steady contributor throughout the season. So that alone, combined with his actual performance on both ends, to me, he exceeded expectations slightly, just factoring the health part. But as far as the on-court production, I think he's about as advertised. Obviously, you can nitpick at his handle, some of the turnovers, the adjusting to physicality and pressure, all that stuff. But when it comes down to just Kevin Durant playing basketball, he had one hell of a season, especially at that age. Like, to me, the Suns had to figure out a lot of stuff. They put him in tough situations where he was playing with Keita Bates-Diop and Utah and like all these guys that when Book and Beal were both out early, and he really kind of righted the ship and was that steady force that I thought really kept them afloat during some really difficult times. So to me, you could say what you want about how things ended and some of his struggles, but overall body of work, like this was another very good Kevin Durant season. Don't get it twisted. And I think this team will be back. And I think with a little more, chemistry, continuity, a better core around them, which we'll get into, like, I think he's going to get even better in year 2, even though he's getting older. And I will stand by that.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think games played is exactly, I think, the highlight, the number one thing you would have to point to. He played the most minutes as well since his MVP season, most minutes in a season in a decade. Now, of course, that's good to see from a longevity standpoint. Not great when you think about probably more than you wanted him to have to play, given that he is a little older. You just don't want anyone to have to be up there. But I think you have to feel exactly what you just said, which is that he's back on track physically. The Achilles is long behind him. And we've always thought KD is a guy that should not have to worry much about aging well because his game is age-proof in a lot of ways, especially on the offensive end. So you just look at, his efficiency, he's going to walk into elite efficiency. It was actually a touchdown from his past several seasons, but, still way more than league average. His usage went down, but he's at, points per game, all those things that we've come to expect of him. He's at 27, 7, and 5, basically. That's pretty much what he's been at most of his career. I would say a couple things, and not negative things, but just to get a little more specific. I feel like Durant, to me, he probably was put into a position because of some of the lineups he was out there with, and then when he was out there with the best guys, he was off the ball more, where he probably did a little bit more of just sort of pure, isolation scoring than you would want him to do from a wear and tear standpoint, just from a maximizing what he is standpoint. I think getting him into more of a flow and everything else, not his fault, but that was probably the one thing I would have liked to see, but that didn't end up getting to work out because of everything around him. And I think that might be part of the little bit of, dip in his efficiency and everything else. And then defensively, his highs were incredible. That stretch where he was guarding, Luka and Kawhi, and there was some point guard he guarded that I'm not remembering in that stretch as well. And amazing. The fact that he can still do that at his age is awesome. I would have liked to see a little more consistency, but again, like with so many things with this team this season, it's very circular where, okay, well, I would have liked to see more defense, but the context around him wasn't great, so I'm not going to blame him, but I still have to factor it in somehow. That's kind of where I go, but production, efficiency, two-way impact, availability, there's a reason he was second-team All-NBA. I think when you traded for Kevin Durant, this is the type of season you were planning on getting, and you would think if he continues to do this, the Suns are going to be right where they want to be.
100%. And look, I think a lot of the stuff he does gets almost taken for granted, not just by Suns fans, but just NBA fans in general. Like the fact that he could have a quote-unquote down year efficiency-wise, and he's still way above league average across the board, and he's still at that volume and in a role on a team where it was so inconsistent. Like you said, it was just different lineups throughout the year, trying to figure out how to play with stars when they came back even. It's not like it's a sure thing that you're going to click with your guys year one. So I think what you're going to see next year is hopefully a better supporting cast with the bench depth built out around him. He's going to have better lineups, more familiarity with Booker and Beal, where I think that choppy game flow will kind of take care of itself with more reps and just getting to know how to play with these guys. So I think just looking ahead a little bit to what we're going to talk about, just optimizing him is the main goal for this team and figuring out how to do that. We'll talk about that, but I think we're going to see in year two, a lot of these things are going to come naturally just through that familiarity and a different coach, a different system, different lineups around him. So I think to me, he's going to lead you to nearly 50 wins every year if he's healthy. I think obviously you have to have the right cast around him, but I think that shouldn't be taken for granted. That's a baseline from Kevin Durant, and there's not too many players you could really say that about.
No, not at all, and especially guys in their mid-30s. And, look, I think the other thing on the age side of it is you might have felt differently, maybe say even in 2019 when he ruptures the Achilles, but even just in the 5 years since then, we've seen Tom Brady win another Super Bowl in his 40s. We've seen, Taurasi and Bird in the WNBA, and even with the Suns, Chris Paul was defying age for a long time. LeBron continues to do it. So I just think it's less of a skeptical idea anymore than it would have been, and that just gives me more optimism. The last small thing I forgot to mention on his just the stats of the season and everything else that he provided is three-point shooting. He took the most three-point attempts, and obviously I know some of that's from injury, but basically his most three-point attempts since he was in Oklahoma City. And that's huge. He made 41% of them. So if he's going to be able to take a high volume of threes, make a high volume of threes, how many times have all Suns fans said, take more threes or generate more threes, or some variety of that sentence since that Minnesota series where they could not buy a deep shot at all. KD's a part of the solution there too. So let's talk about it's not about getting more. We just said he's incredible. He's elite. He's doing everything that you would want him to do, but it's more about within this roster, what should it look like? And then how do you get closer to that? So we'll keep diving into Durant coming up next. First, today's show brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 straight to your account to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Speaking of player props, I have had my eye on... There's all sorts of stuff in the NBA Finals when you're able to just focus on one series. So, who's going to win? Dallas obviously is nice just given that they're the underdog, but NBA Finals MVP Jaylen Brown plus 600 is very interesting. He's going to be guarding Luka. He's been their best offensive guy a lot of nights. You could go series length. You can always get pretty good value there if you just go, well, Dallas in 6. If they're going to win it, it'll probably be in 6 or 7. Do that. When you get more specific, the odds go up, and you can watch that money come in. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Brandon. So just looking at Durant here, the question that I kind of had circling in my head that I think we can explore is, do the Suns, I think better than saying need, let's say want. Should they want more balance from Kevin Durant? Do you think ideally he doesn't have even, his usage went down from previous years, but should it be even lower? Should he be, this kind of Swiss Army knife more than a go-to every possession guy, or is that just sounds silly? As I'm saying it, I can see the KD stands in the comments telling me how dumb I am, but if you could craft in a lab what a KD season could look like next year with this big three and with some of the roster stuff we know is going to be in place, what would it look like?
So I think I'm in alignment with the KD stance. I'm going to agree with them and say I think his usage should go up a little bit. And I think, let me explain that. First of all, I think it needs to become, I think he was used as a decoy a little bit too much to the point to where there's a difference between being a decoy and a threat. They need to make him a threat constantly. And how do you do that? You need to put him in the right spots. Offensively, I think he needs to be a little bit more of a secondary facilitator where he's just involved in the play in some way. And that's not going to mean he has to jack up a ton more shots. He just needs to touch the ball more. And I think getting him in a rhythm early has been the key. Like anytime you look at his big games, if he's involved early, that's usually when it starts. He gets in a little bit of a rhythm and the rest of the game is just smooth for him. So I think you can't have him standing in the corner not touching the ball. Like he needs to be a part of the play, every play. And how do you do that? That's why I'm not getting paid as much as Coach Bud is. He can figure that out. But I think getting him more involved offensively consistently to where he's not touching the ball for like 3-4 possessions in a row, that's a major key in terms of just pure rhythm, because that's going to help the entire team. The ball needs a snap. That's the Suns. Anytime they pound the ball, it's not going to result in a good shot. And if it does, sometimes they get away with it because they have the best tough shot makers in the league. But you can't, like we saw in the Minnesota series, you can't bank on that, or that's going to happen again. They're going to get swept again if they just pound the ball into oblivion. So I think,
and it's just frustrating, like you said, right? You said it with the flow and the kind of just involvement aspect. I think it's the most natural thing about basketball. It's the most obvious thing to see happening on the court, and I'm not going to pretend like I didn't criticize Durant at times for his odd, approach during some of these games, and even his defensive effort and some of the stuff I hit on in that last segment would come and go based on the things you're talking about. But I also don't. It's not like I blame him. It's not like I think it's the most, horrific thing that you could do. It's very human. It's very normal, and I think that's, to me, a big part of it too, right? The decoy thing, I'm not sure it was necessarily always the plan for him to end up a decoy. I just think he was the guy who, because of their lack of ball movement and their lack of structure and organization a lot of the time on the offensive end, and the ways that Book and Beal kind of fell short as facilitators, ended up meaning that Durant, because he's not this guy you can dump it into anymore at his age, and with the little bit of burst that he's lost and the way teams play him for steals more often now and all that, if he's not going to start a possession with the ball in his hands, somebody has to get it to him. And if those guys are, not playing their best or not doing that job, well, then it ends up feeling like he's less impactful by way of that. So, again, I'm speaking KD Stan language with all that as well, but I guess we can talk about how they get closer to it in the next segment. I guess just to add on to the other side of the ball. And you mentioned Bud money. I'd take Vogel money. $6 million to not work sounds pretty nice too, to be honest with you. I wanted to throw that in there. Like I'll even take like the end of the bench assistant coach who might have lost his job with Vogel. Like that's probably what, 200-300K and you're good. I mean, great. I don't know how much those guys' contracts are guaranteed at this point. Maybe not. But yeah, give me any job salaried on an NBA team. I'll take it, no matter how much knowledge I might have. But yeah, great seats. All right, so yeah, defense. Defense is where I was going to go. And I think it just has to be there more consistently. I mean, I've said it. We talked about it in the Beal episode Friday. I said it in Book's episode yesterday. The reality of how this roster is built out is these guys are going to have to be plus defenders, and they're going to have to stretch themselves out a little bit, maybe more than is comfortable, and be much more consistent than, let's be honest, a lot of star players are asked to be in the NBA. It's just the reality when you build a roster that doesn't have a lot of depth, and even just having 3 stars on the court, that's one less role player. So like the math is just how many specialists can you even have in a rotation when you have 3 superstar players who are going to be playing 35 plus minutes. Those guys have to do the dirty work in a way that might suck, but it just has to be there. So I think KD has to be, they have to find a way for him to be able to be more consistent as a rebounder, as a help defender. The on-ball stuff was cool. I don't think he should have ever been put into position to even have to guard Kawhi and all that, like we were also impressed by, frankly. That should not be his job. He should be filling space, protecting the rim, just helping to squelch out teams by using his size and his length and his IQ, and then ending possessions with rebounds. He's 6'10", 7 feet tall. Use him as that. A lot of teams have in the past. It's why the Nets looked so good on defense at times, and the Warriors' system was so effective. The Suns got to find a way to get that out of him, and I think if that means some nights doing a little less on offense, or at least playing fewer minutes, or whatever it feels like to get him there, in addition to the personnel that we'll close the show on, you got to do it, because he's probably the most talented defensive player currently on the roster of the best guys, and it didn't feel like that every night because he had to do so much other stuff.
Exactly, and look, when you're putting that much responsibility on someone his age defensively to kind of be the on-ball guy, be the rim protector, be this, be that, like, it's just a lot. And that's why I think having a primary rim protector, first of all, that's something the Suns didn't have. Like, Kevin Durant kind of was that for the most part. And to be that and also be chasing around wings or bigger forwards, like, it's taxing, and it's tough to get consistent effort when on the other end of the floor, especially if it's a game where one of your stars are out, you have that same responsibility and workload. And that's why I think defensively, that should be their number one priority, is just finding rim protection and size. Surround him with that, and he will be better instantly defensively. And the less he has to do of the dirty work, the more he could do the impactful work, which is that secondary rim protection, contesting shots, just being a sheer presence of size that is lurking, and you never know when he's going to show up. And that's when he's at his best defensively, not when he has to do everything, which you could say about anyone, honestly. Like, you look at Rudy Gobert as a perfect example. They're completely different players, but Minnesota surrounded him with more capable on-ball defenders than he had in Utah, and that defense looks night and day difference, where he was trying to cover for so many different things and gaps that those guards or frontline defense just wouldn't provide. So I think solidify your perimeter defense first, find some rim protection, and everything else will be easy. And that's easier said than done, but that's ultimately how you're going to get the best defensive version of KD.
Yeah, let's circle back to defense to close out the show in that center position a little bit. But next up, I want to hit on, I'm going to double back on myself a little bit. I have a position, I have a need for the Suns in this offseason where I think it would benefit Durant, maybe surprisingly, more than anybody else. So we'll get into that in just a second. First, today's show brought to you by BetterHelp. Revolutionizing therapy, bringing it to you, making it easier. We all carry around different stressors, big and small. When we keep them bottled up, though, it can start to affect us a little too negatively. Therapy is a safe space to get those things off your chest and figure out how to work through whatever's weighing you down. Tons of people in my life have benefited from therapy. Aunts, uncles, parents, partner, myself. It doesn't have to be trauma or big crisis emergency moment in your life. It can just be a change, something you're dealing with, somebody that you're close with going through something and you need support. Whatever. If you ever feel like it might be helpful, it probably is helpful. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, let BetterHelp help you out. Give it a try. It's entirely online, convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you got to do to get started is fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with licensed therapists, and switch therapists whenever you'd like, at any time, for no additional charge until you find the right person. Get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, let's close out the show. So I'll cut right to it. What I meant in that last segment, doubling back on myself a little bit, point guard, something we've all debated endlessly. I'm very much on the record that should not be their biggest priority, that it is not their biggest need, Brandon. But I do feel like it would help Durant maybe more than anybody else, because the point you made about the decoy concept to me, we were saying that last year being the second half of the season when he got here after the trade. But if you remember, almost every time that he would have a big flurry and start to get involved, who was it that was making that happen for him? Most of the time it was Chris Paul. And because he's not a guy that you can just throw it to anymore, and because he does need to be involved a lot to be at his best, somebody who can effectively run those little elbow pin downs at the free throw line that he's so good at, or use KD as a screener and kind of play a two-man game with him, or be actually looking for him on the pass when he is a floor spacer rather than just ending up having him be a decoy. That's probably the best case that I can come up with for getting a point guard, is to say, if we could even get 10% more out of KD if I'm in that Suns front office, that might be reason enough to go for it. It would help.
Yeah, and it has to be the right fit. That's the hard part, especially given their limitations. But I agree. I mean, obviously it's not. It shouldn't be where all their eggs go in like one basket for a point guard. I think they have bigger fish to fry than that. Like they have a lot of issues to tackle roster-wise. But I think if you can do that, like, why not? If the right situation presents itself, whether it's a 6'8" point guard or renewal of bringing back the guy you just talked about, there's just a lot of different ways they can go. And I think even getting creative in a trade. But I think your first, check off the box has to be finding, some size up front and some a rim threat or a lob threat. Just add some pressure at the rim for everyone, not just KD. I think it optimizes the whole team to have that type of spacing, that vertical spacing that they lacked. But yeah, I'm with you. I think it's a point guard, and that goes across the board for Booker, Beal, and Durant. And I get the argument that you want the ball in their hands. You don't want someone to take it out of their hands. But then there's the other side of the coin where occasionally it would be nice. So trying to find that fine balance of like not limiting their touches, but also putting them in positions to succeed. That's what point guards do. So find the right one, and I think you can maximize it.
I think Book and Beal should be able to be kind of self-sufficient without it, and that's ultimately why I think like if it's just about KD or whatever, like, and even some of the pace stuff, like it's just hard for me to build a case for why it should be a priority, like we've both said now multiple times. But I think with Durant in particular, it's just the fact that he does get stripped if he has to just create something out of nothing too often. Teams are used to that now. The scouting report on that is out, so he's not somebody that can just do that, whereas Book and Beal, frankly, like they should be. And I think when you talk about those two in particular, it kind of just does come back to the reality of how the roster is built is those guys have to just play better as facilitators. That's going to be, even if they get a point guard option, even if it's Chris Paul, great. He's probably not closing every game come postseason time. So everything does ultimately just come back to the way that this team chose to construct itself. Those two perimeter guys, they got to get the ball to Durant better. They got to turn the ball over less, play with better pace, do whatever. But to go to the center spot, which you hit on there, I think back to Nick Claxton, Brandon. Like, to me, KD looked maybe as good as he ever has on defense. Obviously, there were some moments with Draymond that were pretty special too. And Claxton, he did not look like the same guy this past year without Durant. I think I would be looking at that kind of a partnership pretty hard if I'm the Suns, as I'm thinking about if Nurkic isn't the long-term solution there, or if you want to get some variety into that locker room alongside Nurkic. I want to be getting as close to Nick Claxton as I can. And I know he's a free agent. Stop. He's not signing a minimum contract. So it's not literally going to be Claxton. But how close can I get to that? Somebody who's mobile, athletic, big in terms of length and height, and smart, that can develop some chemistry with Durant and actually some switchability and cohesion, and those guys can play off of each other. I think Nurkic is just too plodding, and Durant is being asked, like you were saying a minute ago, to do too much when he's having to be the full back line of the defense so often. That's not going to work. Get me some additional support, though, and I could see Durant maybe having an even better defensive season than he just did. Yeah,
and your stars shouldn't have to do all the dirty work defensively, like unless they're in their prime, and it's like we're talking about a LeBron or an MJ or just someone that's just an absolute sicko and is going to take on that role two ways, and even then, it's not going to be perfect. So to ask a 36-year-old to do that, like that's why you need a Claxton. You need a guy that I got yelled at for proposing a Daniel Gafford who's about to start in the NBA Finals. That's kind of why I threw that trade scenario out there, and I will take a victory lap on that, and I don't care. So to me, I think that's the type of center you need. You need that rim protection to where Durant doesn't have to be the only guy doing it. And I think that's going to open up so much more possibilities from defensively, as far as just being more of that roamer where he's killing you in different ways defensively. And then, okay, you get Gafford on one side, Durant's going to come from the weak side and block your shot. Like, to me, that's where they need to focus all their energy, is figuring out the center position. And like you said, Nurkic is going to be tough to trade, I think, with that contract and given their limitations. So there's a world where you could find that guy and keep Nurkic to have two different looks, two different types of teams that where, having versatility is huge. So that to me is the biggest storyline this offseason, whether it's in the draft, whether it's a trade, whether it's a free agency, like surprise maybe, I don't know, like just figuring out how do you get another center that can actually play in the playoffs. I'm talking about the fringe guy that could be the next whatever. Like we need someone that's done it before, even if it is buy low, like someone that's done it before and can step in right away. There's not too many of them, but I think you can find centers, find a reclamation project. It's going to be tough, but it's definitely doable, and it will make everyone's life easier if they can find that guy. I mean, to be honest with you,
it's hard to find that guy in free agency and bet on them, as we found out last year when they tried Metu and Eubanks and even Nurkic, and frankly sort of went 0-3 big picture. But they have a pick at 22 where there's
That's
like
it. That's
four
it right there.
centers that are expected to go in that range, and one of them apparently got a promise, Daron Holmes. I don't know where that's coming from, but probably not the Suns. I don't think 22 is high enough to stop working out with the promise. Maybe I'm wrong, but they gotta think long and hard about keeping the pick just for that reason alone. But yeah, I guess to me it's like, even if it's just a reality that Nurkic has to stay on the team for one reason or another, and you can't work out a deal, you can't roll into next season just trying the same thing again at that spot. How much money would you bribe Drew Eubanks with under the table to get him to not stay on the team and take that player option? If you're Matt Ishbia, how many stocks for UWM are you throwing his way?
As many as he wants. As many as he wants. It's not my money, though. So, I mean,
it's like the Adam Silver time to learn Chinese buddy meme, but it's time to learn mortgaging and pretend to be very interested in that industry so that there's no funny business going on. It's just, I just made an investment. What do you want from me? And I happen to decline my option and become a free agent and go sign with the Spurs again or whatever. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's especially the whole tampering thing. Like, that's a very interesting subplot to watch during the center hunt. So I'm very curious to see how that goes. Like, between that and the draft and what they do with their pick, like in the center stuff, like, it's like we're laughing now, but like that's probably the most important pathway for them to figure something out, like defensively at least. I think to unlock this Suns team, you need a center, you need a backbone, and they don't have that right now. So we'll see.
At least the Sixers got PJ Tucker, who was a legit, starting caliber player for them 2 years ago, next to Embiid when he won an MVP. The Suns, and that's why they lost their pick in the second round for tampering. The Suns got Drew Eubanks. So, one of the weirdest signings I can remember in a long time for the Suns, given all of that happened. But, enough piling on Drew Eubanks in a podcast that's supposed to be about Kevin Durant. That'll wrap us up for the day. More to come throughout the week. I'll probably do a news roundup tomorrow. The Daron Holmes thing was kind of interesting to me. There were some other rumors, coaching stuff, free agency, just sort of from a Suns perspective as the news piles in here. So hit follow or subscribe if you haven't already. Keep track of all of it right here every day. Read Brandon and the crew over at Bright Side of the Sun, and I will catch you guys tomorrow.